Rediscover your past by digitizing your family's memories with LEGACYBOX. Watch until the end of this video to find out more about preserving your legacy, and then visit legacybox.com/recollection. Most people who grew up poor in the 1970s didn't know what they were missing, and they assumed everyone lived the very same way. Back then, stretching a dollar was an art form, with creative and sometimes funny solutions for being short on cash. Looking back, it's easy to see the struggle, but it's just as easy to smile as you think back on your own childhood. In a lot of homes, the TV's channel knob broke off at some point and never got replaced. Instead of buying a new TV set or calling for a repairman, families just grabbed a pair of pliers and kept them on top of the TV as a permanent solution. Turning the dial became a careful operation, especially if the picture was fuzzy or the sound dropped out. Everyone in the house learned how to use the pliers just right, clicking through the channels slowly, hoping to land on one that came in clear. Buying bread from the day-old shelf was common in families trying to stretch a dollar. It was usually just slightly less soft than the fresh loaves, but perfectly fine for toast or sandwiches. If the store had name-brand bread marked down, that was considered a lucky find. No one really thought of it as less than. It was just a practical way to keep the pantry stocked without spending extra. Writing a check before payday wasn't reckless, it was strategy. Parents would keep a close eye on what day they got paid, and time the check accordingly, knowing it would take a day or two before the bank processed it. Grocery shopping often came with quiet calculation of what would clear and when. It was just one of those everyday ways people made things work when money was tight. Shoes from Payless, Kinney, or even Kmart were a staple in many households, especially for growing kids. Most kids had two pairs, one good pair for special occasions and a worn-out pair for everyday use. The good pair had to last, sometimes through an entire school year, and they were only worn when absolutely necessary. The old pair, even if it had holes or thinning soles, stayed in rotation as long as it could hold up. Wearing patched clothing wasn't anything unusual. When jeans or skirts wore thin or ripped, especially at the knees, parents would sew on a patch instead of tossing them out. Iron-on patches were popular, but sometimes they were stitched on by hand, with whatever fabric or thread was around. Clothes were handed down, worn out, patched, and worn again. It wasn't about fashion, it was about keeping things going as long as possible. It wasn't uncommon for a family car to have trouble starting, especially if it was an older model. If the battery was weak or the starter wasn't working, pushing the car to get it rolling and then popping the clutch was the go-to method. One person would sit in the driver's seat, while others gave it a push until the engine caught. It was frustrating at times, but it was just another part of daily life when you didn't have the money for repairs. Government assistance programs provided things like large blocks of processed cheese and powdered milk to help families get by. The cheese worked great for sandwiches or even cooking. Powdered milk was mixed with water and stored in the fridge, though it didn't taste much like the real thing. These foods weren't fancy, but they helped stretch the grocery budgets during tough times. When birthdays or holidays rolled around, many families got creative with wrapping paper. Instead of buying expensive gift wrap, they used the comic section of the newspaper or cut up brown paper grocery bags. The results were simple, but they did the job just fine. Sometimes kids even decorated the plain bags with drawings to make them feel more special. Bologna sandwiches were a lunchbox regular for kids in the 70s, served on plain white bread, maybe with a slice of cheese or a dab of mustard. They were quick, cheap, and filling. Some families fried the bologna in a pan to give it extra flavor. It wasn't gourmet, but it was what many kids grew up eating day after day, and most didn't think twice about it. Kids often found small ways to earn money, whether by collecting glass bottles for the deposit refund, delivering newspapers before school, or babysitting neighborhood kids. These jobs taught responsibility early and gave kids a little spending money of their own. It was normal to start helping out financially in small ways, even before you were old enough to get a real job. During the winter, bread bags served as makeshift waterproof liners for boots. If your shoes had holes or weren't insulated, you could slip a bread bag over your socks to help keep your feet dry. Some people even put them over their boots. They were held in place with rubber bands or tucked into pant legs. It wasn't the most comfortable setup, but it was what families used when buying new boots wasn't an option. When the school book fair flyer came home, kids would grab a pencil and start circling all the books they hoped to get. Often there wasn't money to buy anything, but it was still fun to dream. Sometimes you'd get a few dollars from your parents to pick out a cheap book or bookmark. Even without buying anything, the book fair was still something to look forward to. If you showed up at school without lunch money or a packed meal, the school would give you a plain peanut butter sandwich. It was dry, basic, and came with a carton of milk if you were lucky. It wasn't something kids looked forward to, but it was better than going hungry. Most kids who had to eat it didn't complain. They just ate quietly and moved on with their day. In many homes, the thermostat was strictly off limits to kids. If it was cold, you were told to wear a sweater. If it was too hot, you opened a window, but not for long. Leaving a door open, even for a few seconds, was sure to get a sharp reminder from a parent, trying to keep heating and cooling bills low. These rules weren't meant to be mean, they were just practical. At the start of the school year, teachers often asked kids to write about their summer vacations. For those who hadn't gone anywhere, it meant finding ways to make the ordinary sound exciting. Playing outside, going to the city pool, or visiting the cousins became the highlights. You didn't realize until later that some kids went on big trips. You just figured everyone's summer looked like yours. If you grew up in the 80s, it may have taken you a while to figure out that your family struggled financially. Everything just seemed normal, right up until you discovered other people had way nicer things than you. If your family went to the movies, chances are it wasn't opening weekend at the big theater. It was the $1 show a few months later. These second-run theaters were usually a little run down, with sticky floors, faded posters, and seats that squeaked every time someone shifted. Popcorn was often stale, but that didn't matter. You were just excited to see a movie on the big screen. While other kids bragged about catching Ghostbusters on day one, you knew you'd get your chance weeks later, at a theater that was a bit more run down than the movie theaters at the mall. Dinner time had a different feel when money was tight, especially when it came to hot dogs. Instead of buns, Mom just pulled out a stack of Wonder Bread. The hot dogs would usually split right through the flimsy bread, leaving mustard and ketchup dripping onto your hands, but it was still delicious. It was one of those substitutions that made sense, since you already had a loaf on the counter, so there was no need to spend extra on the pricey buns. It may have been at birthday parties or neighborhood barbecues that you discovered real buns existed, but at home, hot dogs on plain white bread was how it was done. In the 80s, having cable at all was a luxury, but families who struggled stuck with over-the-air TV channels, and at the very most, they paid for just basic cable, which meant only a dozen channels or so. There was no MTV, no Nickelodeon, and definitely no HBO. While your friends stayed up watching music videos and movies with no commercials, you were tuning into reruns with bad reception, but you learned to make the most of it, and it was always a treat to stay over at a friend's house who had the ever-expanding channel lineup that cable TV had to offer. For families without credit cards or spare cash, layaway was the only way Christmas morning looked like Christmas. Parents would pick out toys at Kmart or Sears, pay a few dollars each week, and hope they had it covered before December 24th. As a kid, you might have spotted a gift weeks earlier in the store, only to wonder if it would ever actually make it under the tree. There were no giant piles of presents that crossed off everything on your Christmas list, but rather a few carefully chosen presents that made Christmas still feel special. By the mid-1980s, Every kid wanted the newest freestyle bike with bright colors and stunt pegs. If you were still pedaling a beat-up BMX from years earlier, it showed. The seat was probably torn, the frame dull, and the stickers were peeling, while all the cool kids zipped around on shiny new Haros or GTs. This meant you couldn't try any new tricks, so you were just left cruising around while others showed off. Still, that old bike was your ticket to freedom, and on any given day, it took you where you wanted to go. When you opened the kitchen cabinet in a poor household, you didn't find a neat, matching set of glassware. Instead, there was a hodgepodge of Burger King Star Wars cups, Garfield mugs from McDonald's, or maybe an old ET glass from Pizza Hut. All of them were different, making it look more like a collection of prizes than a proper kitchen set. Friends might laugh, but those cups had stories, and you knew exactly which one was yours when it came time for dinner. Gum wasn't something that moms took lightly in the 1980s. If she had a pack of juicy fruit, it wasn't unusual for her to split a stick in half, or even thirds if siblings were around. On special occasions, you might get a whole pack of Hubba Bubba or Bubble Yum, but most of the time you had to stretch a piece of gum as far as it would go. The fights were usually over who got the bigger half, but the memories of tearing a stick of gum in half instantly make you think of your mother and her attempt to be frugal. At dinner, if it was on your plate, you were going to eat it. Complaints about taste didn't matter, because food wasn't wasted. It didn't matter if it was a cheap cut of meat, canned whatever, or casseroles made with whatever there was. It all had to be finished before you could leave the table. Parents didn't sugarcoat it either, often reminding you that there were starving kids in Africa. Looking back, sometimes flavor was secondary to survival, and that meant nothing went to waste. Fashion mattered in the 1980s, and jeans said a lot about where you stood. If you had Levi's or Guess, you were lucky. And if you had the stiff denim jeans from Kmart or JCPenney, everyone knew it too. The fit wasn't the same, the stitching looked off, and they didn't have the cool logo patches in the right spots. To make things worse, hand-me-downs were common, so not only did you not get the brand you wanted, you didn't even get to pick the style. In a decade obsessed with labels, those discount store jeans made your financial standing pretty clear. Eating out was rare, but when it happened, nothing went to waste. Did you have parents that saved the napkins, straws, and ketchup packets to reuse later? The kitchen drawer became a jumble of fast food extras that were used like the real thing. Instead of a bottle of Heinz on the table, you squeezed out packets one by one. For many families, this was just another way they stretched every dollar. Getting free lunch at school felt like a blessing and a curse. It guaranteed you a hot meal every single school day, but it also meant standing in a separate line or flashing a special ticket that let everyone know your parents didn't make much money. The stigma was heavy, with kids teasing each other about it, but at least you still ate, because it was one less thing for your parents to have to worry about. You never got over the embarrassment, but it faded a bit when you realized hunger was a lot worse. The Nintendo Entertainment System was the hot ticket by 1986, and if you didn't have one, it showed. While friends were playing Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt, you were still plugging in Pitfall or Asteroids on an old Atari. The graphics were boring, the controllers were stiff and usually missing parts, and to make it even worse, nobody wanted to come over and play anymore. But if that's what you had, that's what you played. And if you didn't like it, you could always go outside and play there. Growing up in a trailer park during the 1980s carried its own reputation. Kids from trailer parks often got teased at school, and trailer trash was a common name for kids who lived there. The lots were generally small, and the trailers were pretty run down, so kids would often be embarrassed to have friends over, so they just ended up hanging out with the other trailer park kids. But inside those narrow homes, families figured out ways to make do, from hand-me-down furniture to cheap meals and few extras. It wasn't glamorous, but it was still home. Recollection Road and LEGACYBOX both believe it's important to preserve the past. If you're like me, there's a box of your family's treasured home movies and photos tucked away somewhere, and LEGACYBOX can help you preserve them digitally. The process is a simple and safe solution for converting your home movies and photos to thumb drive or to the cloud. Just send in your LEGACYBOX filled with old VHS and camcorder tapes, film reels, and pictures, and get back digital copies that can be easily enjoyed, shared, and kept organized. It's that easy. LEGACYBOX is trusted by over 1 million people, and it's all done right here in the USA. Get started preserving your past today. Go to legacybox.com/recollection to get an incredible 55% off. Buy today to take advantage of this exclusive offer and send in your memories when you're ready. Go to legacybox.com/recollection to save 55% while supplies last. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and make sure to check the description of this video for links to pick up a t-shirt. Also, don't forget to visit our friends at Horn & Hardart to save 10% on your next order. Visit hornandhardart.com/recollection. Thank you to our loyal Patreon supporters listed here. Visit patreon.com/recollectionroad to join the club.